I was organizing old photo albums in the attic when my grandson Tommy found me, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the small window. He's 12 now, at that age where everything's a question, where the world is still being assembled piece by piece in his mind. I didn't hear him come up the creaky stairs, so when he spoke, I nearly dropped the album I was holding. "Grandpa," he said, settling down cross-legged beside me. "Who's Uncle Ray?" My heart did something complicated in my chest, that familiar ache that never quite goes away, even after all these years. I looked down at the photograph in Tommy's hands, the one he must have pulled from the box I hadn't gotten to yet. There we were, Ray and me, 23 years old, sitting on the hood of my old Chevy pickup at the lake, the summer of 1973. Ray's arm was slung casually over my shoulder, both of us squinting into the sun, grinning like we owned the world. "That's my old friend Ray," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "We grew up together." Tommy studied the photo with that intense focus kids have, really looking at it. Then he tilted his head and asked the question that changed everything. "Why are you looking at him like that?" I felt the air leave my lungs. In all these years, no one had ever asked me that. No one had ever really looked closely enough to see what was written so plainly on my 23-year-old face. But Tommy saw it. This 12-year-old boy saw what I'd spent decades trying to hide, trying to forget, trying to live with. "What do you mean, buddy?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "In all these pictures," Tommy said, spreading out several more photos he'd found, "you're looking at Uncle Ray different than he's looking at the camera. Like, I don't know, like how Dad looks at Mom sometimes when he thinks no one's watching." I sat there on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by boxes of memories I'd sealed away, and I realized I had a choice to make. I could lie, deflect, change the subject like I'd done for 50 years, or I could tell this boy, my grandson, the truth. I could give him something I never had, something that might have changed everything, an honest story about love. "Can I tell you about Ray?" I asked. "The real story?" Tommy nodded, setting the photos down carefully between us, and I took a deep breath. Ray moved in next door the summer I turned 7. I remember watching the moving truck pull up, remember seeing this skinny kid with dark hair and knobby knees helping carry boxes. My mother made me take over a casserole, like mothers did back then. And when Ray answered the door, he had this smile that seemed too big for his face. "Want to see my room?" he asked, and just like that, we were friends. We did everything together, built forts in the woods behind our houses, learned to ride bikes down the steep hill on Maple Street, spent endless summer days at the lake swimming until our fingers pruned. Ray was braver than me, always pushing me to try new things, to climb higher, swim further, dream bigger. He made me feel like I could be more than what I was. We grew up side by side, through awkward middle school years, through high school with all its complications. We played on the same baseball team, worked summer jobs at the hardware store downtown, learned to drive in my dad's old Buick. Everyone knew us as a pair, Tom and Ray, Ray and Tom, like we were one unit instead of two separate people. But somewhere along the way, things changed for me. Or maybe they'd always been different, and I just finally had the words to understand it. I was 16 when I realized I didn't look at girls the way other guys did. I tried. God knows I tried. I dated Susan Miller for 3 months junior year, took her to homecoming, kissed her goodnight on her front porch. But it felt like acting, like playing a role in a movie about someone else's life. What I couldn't admit, what I barely let myself think, was that when Ray talked about girls he liked, I felt sick to my stomach. When he dated Jennifer Chen's senior year, I made excuses not to hang out, couldn't stand seeing them together. I told myself it was because I missed my best friend, that I was just jealous of the time he spent with her. But late at night, alone in my room, I knew the truth. I was in love with my best friend, and in 1972 in our small Ohio town, that was something I could never, ever say out loud. Tommy listened quietly, his young face serious and thoughtful. I paused, wondering if I should stop, if this was too much for a 12-year-old. But he looked at me and said, "What happened next, Grandpa?" So I continued. After high school, Ray and I both got jobs at the lumber mill. We rented a small apartment together on the east side of town, a two-bedroom place above Mrs. Henderson's bakery that always smelled like fresh bread in the mornings. Those were the best 2 years of my life, and the hardest. Living with Ray, sharing space with him, seeing him first thing every morning and last thing every night, it was everything I wanted, and nothing I could have. I became an expert at hiding. I dated occasionally, enough to avoid questions. I learned to look away when Ray changed shirts, to keep my voice steady when he talked about his dates, to bury everything I felt so deep that sometimes I almost forgot it was there. Almost. The night everything changed was October 15th, 1973. I remember because it was Ray's 24th birthday. We'd gone to Murphy's Bar downtown with some guys from work, had too many beers, played pool, and laughed until our sides hurt. Walking home after midnight, Ray stumbled on the uneven sidewalk, and I caught his arm. He leaned into me, and we walked like that for a while, his weight against my side, my arm steadying him. At our apartment door, fumbling with keys, Ray turned to me and said, "Tom, can I tell you something?" His words were slurred, but his eyes were clear, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe. Hope. "Sure, buddy," I said, finally getting the door open. "Anything." We went inside and Ray sat heavily on our worn couch. I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched, and waited. Ray stared at his hands for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I think there's something wrong with me," he said. "I think I'm broken somehow." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What do you mean?" Ray looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes. "I don't feel about girls the way I'm supposed to," he said, "the way other guys do. I've tried, Tom. God, I've tried so hard, but it's not, I can't." He stopped, and in the silence, everything hung suspended. I could feel the moment stretching out, could feel the weight of all the words I'd never said pressing against my chest. I could play it safe, comfort him as a friend, keep my secrets locked away, or I could take the biggest risk of my life. "You're not broken," I said, and my voice shook. "Ray, you're not broken. I know because I feel the same way." The look on his face, Tommy, I can still see it clear as day 50 years later. Shock, disbelief, and then something that looked like relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "You?" he whispered. "You feel—" I nodded, not trusting my voice. And then, because I'd already jumped off the cliff, I said the rest. "Especially about you." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Ray reached out and took my hand, just held it there between us on the couch, and I felt like I could finally breathe after holding my breath for 7 years. "I've loved you since we were 17, Ray said, maybe longer. I thought I was alone in this. I thought I was the only one. We sat there on that couch until dawn, holding hands, talking about everything we'd kept hidden, all the fear and loneliness and desperate hoping. And when the sun came up, Ray kissed me, soft and careful, and it felt like coming home. Tommy's eyes were wide. "So Uncle Ray was your boyfriend?" "Yes," I said, and it felt extraordinary to say it out loud after all these years. He was my boyfriend, my partner, the love of my life. For 3 years we lived in that apartment above the bakery, and they were the happiest years I've known. We were careful, always careful. We told people we were roommates, nothing more. We never held hands in public, never showed affection where anyone could see. It was 1970s Ohio, and men like us had to hide or face consequences we couldn't bear to think about. But in our apartment, behind closed doors, we built a life. We cooked dinners together, Ray always burning the garlic bread, making me laugh. We watched TV curled up on the couch. We talked about dreams of maybe someday moving somewhere bigger, somewhere we could be ourselves. We loved each other the best way we knew how, in secret, in stolen moments, in the safety of our own small world. My parents never knew. Ray's parents never knew. We were just best friends who lived together, who spent all their time together. And if anyone thought it was odd, they never said so. Or maybe they did say so, and we just never heard it. We were good at not hearing things we didn't want to hear. Then, in 1976, everything fell apart. Ray's father had a stroke, and Ray's mother needed help. She was alone in that big house, couldn't manage by herself. Ray had two sisters, but they'd both married and moved away, started their own families. It fell to Ray to go home, to help his mother, to do what was expected of a good son. We talked about me coming too, finding some excuse, some reason why I'd move back to the neighborhood. But we couldn't think of one that wouldn't raise questions. And the truth was, we were scared. Scared of being too close to family who might notice, might see what we'd worked so hard to hide. "I'll come back," Ray promised me the day he moved out. "As soon as Mom's back on her feet, I'll come back and we'll figure it out." But life doesn't work that way, does it? Ray's father lingered for 2 years before he died. By then, Ray's mother was dependent on him, couldn't imagine managing alone. And the pressure started, the constant questions from relatives, from neighbors. When was Ray going to settle down? Meet a nice girl? Start a family? We still saw each other, found excuses to meet. Ray would drive into town for supplies his mother needed, and we'd meet at the lake, sit on the hood of my truck like we did when we were kids, and hold on to each other like drowning men. But the spaces between visits grew longer. The phone calls became harder. The weight of living two separate lives was crushing us both. In 1979, Ray called and told me he was getting married. Her name was Patricia. She was a teacher at the elementary school, and everyone said they made a nice couple. His voice on the phone was hollow, empty of everything that made him Ray. "I can't do this anymore, Tom," he said. "I can't keep living like this, always hiding, always afraid. Maybe if I just try harder, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can be normal. I can be happy." I wanted to scream, to beg him not to do it, to run away with me somewhere we could be ourselves. But I didn't, because I understood. I understood the exhaustion of hiding, the weight of pretending, the desperate hope that maybe if we just conformed, just did what was expected, the pain would stop. "I hope you'll be happy," I said, and I meant it, even though it broke me to say it. 6 months later, I met your grandmother at a church social. Margaret was kind and patient, and she seemed to like me even though I was quiet and sad more often than not. We dated for a year, and when I proposed, I told myself I was doing the right thing, that this was what life was supposed to look like, that I could learn to be content, if not truly happy. I was never unfaithful to your grandmother, Tommy. I want you to know that. I loved her in my way, respected her, built a life with her. We had your father, raised him in a good home, celebrated holidays and birthdays and all the normal things families do. Margaret was my companion, my partner in the business of living. But she wasn't Ray. Ray and I stayed friends, in the careful way of people who share a past they can't acknowledge. Our families got together for barbecues sometimes, holidays occasionally. I watched Ray's kids grow up alongside your father. I saw the sadness in Ray's eyes that I knew was reflected in my own. We'd catch each other's gaze across a crowded room, and I'd see everything we'd lost, everything we'd given up to live the lives we were supposed to live. Your grandmother died 12 years ago, and Patricia passed 5 years after that. Ray and I started spending more time together then, two old widowers with time on their hands. We'd have coffee on Thursday mornings, play chess in the park on Saturdays. We never talked about what we'd been to each other, never acknowledged those 3 years in the apartment above the bakery. But sometimes Ray would look at me, and I'd see that 23-year-old boy who'd held my hand on a worn-out couch and told me I wasn't alone. Ray died 3 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and quick. I was with him when it happened, actually. We were at the lake, sitting on the tailgate of my truck, the same spot where that photo was taken all those years ago. He'd been quiet that day, thoughtful, and then he turned to me and said, "Tom, I want you to know that those 3 years with you were the happiest of my life. I've had a good life, raised good kids, but I never loved anyone the way I loved you." I was about to tell him I felt the same way, that I'd carried him in my heart for 50 years when he clutched his chest and fell forward. I caught him, held him, and his last words were, "I'm sorry we couldn't be braver." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then he asked, "Do you wish you'd made different choices?" I thought about that, really thought about it. "I wish I'd lived in a different world," I finally said. "A world where Ray and I could have been together openly, where we could have built a real life instead of stealing moments. but I don't regret loving him. That was real, Tommy. That was the most real thing in my life. Does Dad know? Tommy asked. No, I admitted. I've never told anyone this story. You're the first. Why me? I looked at my grandson, at his open, accepting face, and I felt something like hope. Because you saw it, I said. You looked at that photo and you saw love. You didn't see something wrong or shameful. You just saw two people who cared about each other. And I thought maybe you should know that it's okay. Whatever you feel, whoever you love, it's okay. Tommy nodded slowly. At school, he said quietly, there's this boy, Marcus, and sometimes He trailed off, looking scared. I put my arm around his shoulders, pulled him close. It's okay, I said again. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay. You live in a different world than I did, Tommy, a better world. You don't have to hide like Ray and I did. You can be yourself. Aren't you sad, Grandpa? Tommy asked. About Uncle Ray? Every day, I said honestly. But I'm also grateful. Grateful I got to love him at all, even if it wasn't the way I wanted. Grateful for those 3 years when we got to be ourselves. Grateful that he existed in the world, that I knew him, that he knew me. We sat there in the attic for a while longer, looking through old photos, and I told Tommy stories about Ray. Not the sanitized version I'd told for decades, but the real stories. How Ray sang off-key in the shower and burned everything he tried to cook. How he'd leave me notes hidden in my lunch pail at work, nothing romantic that could be discovered, just little jokes or drawings that made me smile. How he'd fall asleep during movies and deny it when I teased him. How he made me feel seen and known and loved in a way I've never felt before or since. When we finally climbed down from the attic, Tommy carrying the box of photos carefully, he turned to me and said, "Thanks for telling me, Grandpa. About Uncle Ray. About everything." "Thank you for asking," I said. "For seeing." That evening, I sat in my living room, holding that old photograph of Ray and me at the lake. I let myself really look at it, at the way I'm gazing at him, at the happiness on both our faces. For 50 years, I've hidden these photos away, afraid of what they revealed. But Tommy saw love, pure and simple, and maybe that's all it ever was. Not something shameful or wrong, but just love. Just two people who found each other and held on for as long as they could. I can't change the past, can't go back and make different choices. Ray is gone, and I'm an old man with more years behind me than ahead. But maybe sharing this story with Tommy, maybe giving him permission to be himself in ways Ray and I never could, maybe that means something. Maybe that's a kind of redemption. I think about Ray every day. I think about what we had and what we lost, what we were too afraid to fight for. And I hope, wherever he is, he knows that I never stopped loving him. That every day of the life I built, the family I raised, the years I lived without him, I carried him with me. He was my first love, my truest love, and the fact that the world wouldn't let us be together doesn't make that love any less real. And now, finally, someone knows, someone sees, and that, in its own way, is a kind of freedom. Total char count, 16,847.